So, um, imagine for a second that you are like managing the emergency response for a massive catastrophic flood.
Oh, man. Right.
That's just swept through this populated valley. The water is still rising, and you've got dozens of rescue helicopters just grounded on a tarmac.
Just waiting.
Yeah, waiting. And you need to know with absolute certainty which rows are completely underwater and which villages are, totally cut off before you can actually deploy them.
Because time is completely running out. Every minute counts.
Exactly. So you do what any emergency manager would do, right? You pull up the latest optical satellite feed on your monitor, but there is a massive problem.
Let me guess.
The weather.
Yeah, the weather. Your camera is completely blocked by thick, relentless monsoon clouds. I mean, you just can't see a single thing on the ground.
Which is, that's just a terrifying position to be in.
Right. So you switch over to the radar satellite feed. Because, radar can see right through the clouds.
Right, it doesn't care about clouds. But what you get back on your screen is this unreadable, grainy, black and white mess of static. It literally looks like a broken television from the 1980s.
The old snow screen.
Exactly. And you have to send this massive file to a specialized analyst, and they need hours to process it, clean it up, and figure out what the radar actually bounced off of.
And by that time, I mean the water has moved.
Yeah. By the time they hand you a readable map and you finally know where to send those helicopters, the situation on the ground has already changed.
Right, so the information is practically useless by the time it becomes actionable.
Exactly. And that frustration, that blind spot in how we view our own planet is exactly what we are unpacking today.
It's such a fascinating topic.
It really is. So for our mission on today's deep dive, we are looking at how a group of engineering students from IIT Madras basically built a startup, engineered a 190-kilogram satellite, launched it on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, and fundamentally solved this exact problem.
Which is just wild to think about.
It's wild. The satellite is called Mission Drishti, and it's built by a company named GalaxEye. And it's the world's first commercial OptoSAR satellite. To really get into this, we're pulling from a huge stack of sources today. We've got news reports on the SpaceX launch, deep technical papers on synthetic aperture radar, an RSAC paper on uncertainty quantification in deep learning, a really complex patent on underground radar imaging, and official press releases from the Indian space sector.
It's a lot of material to cover.
It is, but it's going to be great. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it. Because it really is a massive leap forward in Earth observation. We're essentially looking at a complete convergence of hardware engineering, advanced physics, and, artificial intelligence.
Which are three things that don't always play nicely together.
No, they really don't.
Yeah.
But to appreciate what GalaxEye has done here, you kind of have to understand the sheer scale of the original problem. Like, if you pull up a satellite map on your phone right now, it creates a very specific illusion.
You mean the illusion that the Earth is always sunny and perfectly clear?
Precisely, yeah. Those maps are heavily, heavily curated.
Right.
They're stitched together from thousands of different images, taken on the clearest possible days over years. But the physical reality of the Earth is that it's heavily obscured.
Obscured how? Like, just how bad is it?
Well, at any given moment, depending on global weather patterns, roughly 60 to 70% of the planet's surface is covered in clouds.
Wait, really? 60 to 70%?
Yeah. And then add to that the fact that half the planet is always experiencing night.
Oh, right. Duh. I always forget about nighttime when I think about satellites.
Most people do. So when you combine the clouds and the darkness, you start to realize how incredibly blind traditional optical satellites actually are.
I think we all kind of intuitively know that a camera needs light and, clouds block light. But when you put it in those terms, that we are effectively blind to 70% of the Earth at any given second, it makes relying on optical imaging sound almost irresponsible for things like national security or, disaster response.
It really is a severe limitation. So multispectral imaging, or MSI, which is really just the technical term for the advanced optical cameras on these satellites, it's a passive system.
Okay, passive meaning it's just waiting for light.
Right. It waits for the sun's electromagnetic radiation to hit the Earth, bounce off a tree or a building, and travel back up through the atmosphere into the camera's lens.
Which is great when the weather is nice.
When the sky is clear, it is fantastic. The data is intuitive. You or I could look at a multispectral image and instantly know what we are looking at. Oh, that's a river. That's a highway.
Right, it looks like a normal picture, but introduce a thunderstorm or smoke from a massive wildfire or just the Earth's rotation into night, and that passive sensor is completely dead in the water.
Exactly. Which is why the aerospace industry has leaned so heavily on synthetic aperture radar, or SAR,
Right, so
because SAR flips the script completely. It's an active system. It doesn't wait for the sun. The satellite itself generates a powerful pulse of microwave radiation, fires it down at the Earth, and then listens for the echo, the backscatter as it's called, that returns to the sensor.
so it essentially brings its own flashlight.
A microwave flashlight, yes. That's a great way to think about it. And because microwaves operate at much, much longer wavelengths than visible light, they just ignore the water droplets in clouds.
They just pass right through.
Yeah, they pass right through rain, fog, and smoke without being scattered. It works in the pitch black. It is true, all weather, 247 imaging.
Okay, but here is where I get caught up. If SAR is this ultimate all-seeing eye that doesn't care about clouds or darkness at all, why isn't every single satellite just a SAR satellite? Like, why do we even bother with the optical ones if they're blind half the time?
Well, because of what that microwave echo actually looks like when it comes back. A radar return is not a photograph.
Right, it's the grainy mess we talked about.
Yeah, it's a measurement of physical structure, surface roughness, and electrical properties. It's highly abstract. And let me break down how different these microwaves are, because the frequency you use completely changes what you see.
Okay, let's hear it.
Take the X-band radar, for example, which has a very short wavelength, maybe around 3 centimeters.
3 centimeters, so it's a tight, fast wave.
Yes. Because it's so short, X-band gives you incredible high-resolution detail, but it doesn't penetrate very far. If you shoot X-band at a forest, it bounces right off the top of the canopy. You just see a blanket of leaves.
Okay, so X-band is for the surface layer. Got it.
Then you step down to the C-band, which is around 6 centimeters. Now that wavelength is long enough to slip past the leaves and bounce off the smaller twigs and branches underneath.
Oh, wow.
And it goes further. Go even deeper to the L-band, around 23 centimeters, and now you're penetrating the foliage entirely. The microwaves are interacting with the large branches and the main trunks of the trees.
So you are practically giving the forest an X-ray at that point.
Basically. And it gets wilder. The P-band operates at wavelengths of around 65 centimeters. If you look at a P-band SAR image of a dense jungle, it looks like a barren desert with just bare, ghost-like tree trunks sticking out of the ground. The foliage is completely invisible to it.
That is fascinating. So you can literally tune the satellite to look at whatever specific layer of the environment you actually care about.
Exactly.
But okay, if the penetration is that good, I go back to my question. Why is the guy in my emergency response scenario looking at a grainy mess? Why is it so hard to read?
That brings us to the fundamental curse of radar imaging. It's a phenomenon called speckle.
Speckle. Okay.
And to understand why SAR is so notoriously difficult for untrained humans to read, we really need to dig into the physics of how this image is formed. I mean, have you ever taken a cheap laser pointer and shined it at a wall in a dark room?
Yeah, of course. Who hasn't?
Right. Do you remember what the red dot actually looked like? If you look closely, it isn't a solid, uniform circle of red light.
No, it looks granular.
Granular? Yes. It looks like it's boiling or shimmering with tiny, bright, and dark spots.
Right, it almost looks like television static trapped inside the dot itself.
Exactly. That is speckle. And it happens because a laser, unlike a normal light bulb, produces coherent light.
Coherent light, meaning what exactly?
Meaning every single light wave coming out of that laser pointer is marching in perfect, uniform step. The peaks and troughs of the waves are perfectly aligned with each other.
Okay, coherent waves. I'm with you.
So when those perfectly aligned waves hit the wall, and remember, at a microscopic level, a painted wall is actually a very rough, jagged surface.
Right, it's not actually perfectly smooth.
Exactly. So the light scatters in millions of different directions. Now, as all those scattered waves bounce back to your eye, they start crashing into each other. If the peak of one wave perfectly aligns with the peak of another wave, they amplify each other. That's constructive interference.
And that makes a bright spot.
It creates a very bright spot on your retina.
Okay, and if a peak crashes into a trough?
They cancel each other out. Destructive interference. That creates a dark spot.
I see.
So because the waves were perfectly coherent when they left the laser, the rough surface of the wall creates this chaotic, microscopic battleground of amplifying and canceling waves. That is why the dot looks grainy.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And SAR satellites, they use coherent microwaves, right?
Yes, they do.
Eh.
A SAR antenna is essentially a giant microwave laser pointer in space.
Yeah.
So when those coherent microwaves hit the rough surface of the Earth, a
Mhm.
city, a farm, a flooded river, and bounce back up to space, they experience that exact same chaotic interference.
So it's not a camera problem.
No. The resulting image that the satellite records is fundamentally corrupted by this salt and pepper noise. It is not a resolution problem. It is not a cheap camera. It is a relentless, unavoidable law of physics.
Wow. So when our emergency manager gets that radar map, it's not that the satellite is broken or cheap. It's that the physics of coherent imaging inherently produces a noisy, speckled image.
Exactly.
But how do you fix that? I mean, you can't just change the laws of physics.
You can't. Which is why the traditional method for dealing with speckle, which, by the way, is detailed extensively in those phase retrieval papers we reviewed in the stack, requires a massive amount of brute force.
Brute force how?
To get a clean SAR image that even approaches the intuitive clarity of a normal photograph, you cannot take just one picture.
You have to average them out, take a bunch of them.
Precisely. You have to capture multiple images of the exact same target, but each image needs a slightly different speckle realization.
Speckle realization, meaning the noise pattern is different.
Yes, meaning the satellite has to fly over and look at the target from a slightly different angle or hit it at a slightly different frequency so that the chaotic bright and dark spots shift around.
Oh, I get it. If you average together enough of these different chaotic images, the noise eventually smooths out.
Exactly. The noise cancels itself out and the true structure of the target emerges.
Okay, but how many images are we talking about here? Like 2, 3?
Oh no. The literature suggests that to significantly reduce the speckle contrast to a highly readable level, you often need to average anywhere from 10 to 100 separate images.
Wait, are you serious? 10 to 100 images just to get one clean map of a flood?
Yes, that's the reality of traditional SAR.
That is completely unworkable in a crisis. I mean, a satellite only passes over a specific spot on the Earth, maybe once every few days, depending on its orbit. You can't wait a month to compile 50 radar passes just to figure out if a bridge washed away.
Which brings us to how the legacy aerospace industry has tried to tape this problem together for the last 2 decades.
The Band-Aid solution.
Right. We know optical cameras give us beautiful instant color, but they're blocked by clouds. We know SAR cuts through clouds, but it gives us a noisy, abstract mess. So the old solution was simply, let's launch 2 different satellites.
One optical, one radar.
Right. You fly an optical satellite over a region, and then maybe a few days later, a SAR satellite flies over the same region. You beam all that disparate data down to a massive ground station, and you hand it to a team of data scientists.
Let's say, good luck.
Basically. Their job is to take the optical photo and somehow stitch it together with the radar data in software, trying to create a fused product.
I can already see the nightmare here. Because if you are taking the photo on a sunny Tuesday and the radar sweep on a rainy Thursday, the world has literally changed.
That is the temporal gap. You are trying to fuse 2 different realities. If military vehicles were driving down a road on Tuesday, but they are gone by Thursday, which data set do you actually trust?
Right. It's inherently flawed.
But it gets even worse structurally. It's a problem called spatial misalignment, or parallax error.
Parallax. Explain that for me in this specific context.
Sure. Imagine you take a picture of a skyscraper from directly above. You just see a square roof. Now imagine you take a picture of that exact same skyscraper from miles away at a sharp 45-degree angle. You see the side of the building, and the roof looks warped or elongated.
Yeah, the perspective changes.
Exactly. The optical satellite and the SAR satellite are never in the exact same orbital position. They are looking at the Earth from different angles, different altitudes, with totally different sensor geometries.
Oh, wow.
So when the data scientists on Earth try to overlay those 2 images, the pixels simply do not line up. The radar echo of a mountain ridge is fundamentally skewed compared to the optical photograph of that same ridge.
So you have analysts on the ground desperately trying to stretch, warp, and force these 2 images to match up perfectly, knowing full well that they were taken days apart from completely different angles in space.
It is computationally exhausting, it's heavily prone to human error, and frankly, it is a profoundly inefficient way to observe the planet.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the IIT Madras students.
Yes, it really does.
Because this incredibly frustrating, inefficient reality is what GalaxEye looked at. And they basically asked the most ambitious yet obvious question possible. What if we stop trying to stitch the data together on Earth and just bolt both sensors onto the exact same satellite?
It sounds so incredibly simple when you just say it like that.
But it's an engineering nightmare, right? I mean, why didn't Lockheed Martin or Airbus or one of the giant legacy companies just do this 20 years ago?
Well, to understand why this is such a monumental achievement for Mission Drishti, you have to think about the thermal and physical dynamics of what happens in the vacuum of space. You're trying to co-locate two pieces of technology that actively hate each other.
Hate each other. How so?
Let's start with the multispectral optical imager. It is a highly delicate, precision-engineered instrument. It relies on perfect lenses and incredibly sensitive light detectors.
Okay, makes sense.
For an optical sensor to take a crystal-clear image of the Earth from 500 kilometers away, it needs absolute thermal stability. If the temperature of the camera fluctuates even slightly, the materials expand or contract by fractions of a millimeter.
And that's enough to ruin the picture.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is enough to warp the lens and completely ruin the focus. It needs to be kept cold and perfectly still.
Okay, so the optical camera is basically a diva. It needs a perfectly calm, temperature-controlled environment. What about the JADAR?
The SAR antenna is the exact opposite. It is a brute force instrument. To generate a microwave pulse powerful enough to travel down through the atmosphere, punch through a thunderstorm, hit the ground, and bounce all the way back to space, it requires massive surges of electrical power.
And massive power mean?
Massive heat. When you pump that much power into an antenna, it generates an immense amount of heat.
Oh, I see the problem now. You are taking this delicate, heat-sensitive optical camera and you are literally bolting it to the side of a massive, heat-spewing microwave radiator.
Exactly. And in the vacuum of space, where you can't just use a fan to cool things down, managing that thermal bleed is incredibly difficult.
Because there's no air to carry the heat away.
Right. If the heat from the SAR antenna bleeds over into the optical payload, the lenses warp, the sensors flood with thermal noise, and the optical image is ruined.
Wow.
Furthermore, the massive power surges required for the radar can cause electromagnetic interference that scrambles the delicate optical electronics.
So they essentially had to build a satellite bus, like the physical chassis of the spacecraft, that completely isolates these two systems while keeping them perfectly aligned.
Yes, they engineered what is known as a thermally stable platform. The sheer systems engineering required to fit both an X-band SAR sensor, which, by the way, operates in spotlight mode, up to a staggering 0.9 meter resolution.
0.9 meters. That's incredible.
It is. Fitting that and a 7-band multispectral imager into a single 190-kilogram payload is phenomenal. And they actually did it. That is what Mission Drishti is.
So when that Falcon 9 rocket went up from Vandenberg Space Force Base in May 2026, it wasn't just another satellite launch. It was the deployment of a fundamentally new way of seeing the Earth.
Completely new.
And GalaxEye calls it OptoSAR. So walk me through the actual mechanics of how this dual sensor system captures data, because I know they use a term called sync-fused technology.
Right. Sync-fused is the key to why this works so brilliantly, because both sensors are physically bolted to the exact same platform, traveling at the exact same speed, in the exact same orbit. They completely eliminate the Tuesday versus Thursday temporal gap.
Because Tuesday and Thursday are now the exact same millisecond.
Precisely. The optical camera and the SAR antenna fire simultaneously. They capture the exact same crotch of the Earth at the exact same time.
Solves that problem.
But more importantly, because they're on the same bus, they share the exact same orbital vantage point. They eliminate the parallax error. The viewing geometry is perfectly identical.
So the data scientists on the ground don't have to warp and stretch the images to make them fit anymore?
They don't have to do anything. The data sets are inherently co-registered at the moment of capture. The raw data streams from the optical sensor and the radar sensor are perfectly mathematically aligned the second they are recorded.
That is so elegant.
It is, and this allows GalaxEye's software to instantly fuse the X-band radar returns with the 7-band optical data to create a single, unified image.
And the specs say this fused image has a resolution of 1.8 meters.
Yes.
So let's go back to my emergency manager looking for flooded villages. Instead of getting a blind optical feed or a grainy radar mess that takes hours to decode, what do they actually see with Mission Drishti?
They see the ultimate hybrid, where the optical camera has a clear view. You get the beautiful, intuitive, full-color clarity of a normal photograph. You can see the brown floodwaters, the green trees, the gray asphalt.
Okay, but then a cloud rolls in.
Right. The moment a massive monsoon cloud rolls over the valley, the optical sensor goes blind. Instantly, seamlessly. The sync-fused technology relies on the simultaneous SAR data to fill in the blank space.
Oh, so it basically paints the structure of the ground beneath the cloud using the radar backscatter.
Exactly. It uses the structural depth and penetrative power of the radar to maintain the integrity of the image. The emergency manager gets a continuous, highly readable all-weather map.
That's huge.
They don't have to be a radar physicist to understand it. The technology does all the heavy lifting, and the human just makes the decision.
You know, I want to pause on a detail from the founder interviews that I found really, really compelling. When you look at a breakthrough like this, you always ask, why India?
Right.
We have these massive legacy companies in the US and Europe with billion-dollar budgets. Why did a group of students from Chennai crack the code on OptoSAR first?
It is a textbook example of how geographical constraints drive technological leaps.
How so?
Well, think about where the legacy space industry was born. The U.S., parts of Europe. Generally speaking, these regions enjoy relatively clean, clear skies for a significant portion of the year. When an American company launches an optical satellite to monitor agriculture in the Midwest, they can be reasonably confident they will get usable pictures.
The clouds might be an annoyance, but they aren't like a total deal breaker.
Right. But switch the map to India or Southeast Asia. You are dealing with intense tropical climates. You have intense, relentless monsoon seasons that can last for months. You have persistent, heavy cloud cover that practically blankets the entire subcontinent.
I see where this is going. If you are an Indian company relying on optical satellites during the monsoon, you aren't just inconvenienced, you are entirely blind for a quarter of the year.
Exactly. For the Western companies, the blind spot was a nuisance. They were happy to brute force the two-satellite method because it was, good enough for their specific geography.
Sure.
But for an Indian company, the cloud cover was an existential limitation. If they wanted to monitor their own borders, or track their own crop yields, or respond to their own floods, they could not rely on the legacy systems. They were forced to innovate out of pure geographical necessity.
They couldn't afford to accept good enough. They had to build a system tailored for the harshest observing environment on Earth. And the irony is, by solving the hardest possible version of the problem for themselves, they built a technology that the entire rest of the world now desperately wants.
It's brilliant. What's fascinating here is how the geographical limitations of India actually spurred a technological leap that the rest of the world completely missed.
It really is. But, as with all major engineering leaps, solving one massive problem immediately creates a new, entirely different massive problem, right?
Oh, always.
Let me guess. Data.
An unbelievable avalanche of data.
Because if you have an optical camera and a high-resolution SAR antenna firing at the exact same time, you are generating gigabytes of raw information every single second.
And this is where the physics of communication in space becomes the bottleneck. A satellite in low Earth orbit doesn't just have a permanent high-speed Wi-Fi connection to the ground.
Right.
It is traveling at roughly 28,000 kilometers per hour. It only has a brief window of a few minutes to establish a line-of-sight connection with a ground station antenna to beam its data down.
It's like trying to download a massive 4K movie file while driving past a coffee shop at Mach 20.
That is a very, very accurate way to visualize it. The downlink bandwidth is strictly limited. If Mission Drishti tried to beam down all of the raw, uncompressed optical and SAR data it captured over a single orbit, it would completely choke the transmission pipeline.
It just wouldn't fit.
The satellite would physically run out of time over the ground station before the download finished.
And even if you somehow manage to beam all that raw data down, you are just moving the bottleneck from space to the ground.
Exactly.
Now you have massive servers on Earth that have to ingest gigabytes of raw speckle and optical data, run the sync fusion algorithms, and process it into an image.
Which takes hours. And as we established with the flood scenario, an image that is 6 hours old is historically interesting, but tactically useless.
Right. So how did GalaxEye solve the downlink choke point? Because you can't just put a bigger antenna on a 190-kilogram satellite, right?
No, you can't. They solved it by not sending the raw data at all.
Wing it.
They fundamentally changed the architecture of how a satellite operates. They didn't just put sensors on Mission Drishti, they put an incredibly powerful artificial intelligence brain right there on the bus with them, specifically an NVIDIA Jetson Orin processor.
Wait, NVIDIA, the same chips driving the AI revolution on Earth, are now orbiting it.
Yes, they are leveraging a concept called edge computing.
I've heard that term thrown around a lot in tech circles, edge
Oh,
computing. In this context, the edge of the network is literally 500 kilometers out in space.
Right. So traditionally, the satellite is just a dumb terminal. It takes a picture, sends the raw file to the central server on Earth, and then the server does all the thinking.
Right.
Edge computing flips that. The satellite itself does the thinking. It processes the data at the very edge of the network, right where it is collected.
Wait, so it's not sending the raw data down at all? Let me make sure I understand this. It's almost like, imagine I buy a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle.
Okay.
If I mail you the box of loose pieces, the raw data, you have to spend hours sitting at your table putting it together before you even know what the picture is.
You're getting there, but take it a step further. Edge computing isn't just putting the puzzle together for you. It's putting the puzzle together, analyzing it, and sending you a summary.
So instead of mailing me the 1,000 loose pieces, the satellite puts the puzzle together, looks at the final image, realizes it's a picture of a flooded bridge, and just sends me a text message that says, "Bridge on Highway 4 is underwater."
That is precisely what it does. And GalaxEye proved this capability definitively during a test flight in 2024 on a payload called POEM-4.
What happened on that flight?
They demonstrated that their onboard edge computing system could ingest 400 megabytes of heavy, chaotic, raw SAR data directly from the sensor.
400 megabytes of raw data.
The NVIDIA processor analyzed it, processed it, compressed it, extracted the relevant insights, and turned that 400 megabyte raw file into a highly compressed, analysis-ready file of less than 1.5 megabytes.
Wow.
And it did the entire thing, entirely in space, in under 10 minutes.
That is a staggering compression ratio. You were taking something massive and completely unmanageable and distilling it down to pure, actionable intelligence.
Because of that massive reduction in file size, the satellite doesn't have to struggle with a downlink bottleneck at all. It can beam that tiny 1.5 megabyte file down to almost any receiver on Earth almost instantly.
In a military context, the implications of that are wild. I mean, you don't need a massive vulnerable ground station with banks of servers to receive intelligence anymore.
No, you don't.
The onboard AI processes the radar sweep, identifies the anomalies, and beams down a tiny encrypted file directly to a tactical terminal on a commander's desk that just says, 3 armored vehicles detected moving north at these coordinates.
It completely revolutionizes the speed of decision-making. You are moving from data collection to tactical insight in minutes, not hours.
I love the speed of that, but I have to admit, it also introduces something that makes me deeply uncomfortable.
What's that?
We are taking the human entirely out of the loop in the initial analysis. If the satellite is only sending down the conclusion, we are placing a terrifying amount of trust in the machine.
And you should be cautious. That's a valid concern. When that compressed intelligence file arrives, or when the fused image hits the commander's screen, it is typically handed over to even more AI algorithms on the ground to perform what the industry calls change detection.
Right, change detection, comparing Tuesday to Thursday to see what moved.
Yes, using bitemporal images. You essentially ask the AI, highlight everything that has changed between these two dates.
Yeah.
But deep learning models have a massive, well-documented vulnerability. They're only as smart as the data they were trained on.
Right. If you train an AI on 1 million pictures of normal roads, it gets really good at identifying normal roads.
But what happens when a Category 5 cyclone hits? And that road is ripped apart, covered in debris, and submerged under 6 feet of mud.
It doesn't look like a road anymore.
The landscape becomes totally unrecognizable. In the world of machine learning, this is called out-of-distribution data, or O.
The AI has literally never seen anything like it before. It is outside the distribution of its training.
Exactly. And the dangerous thing about traditional AI is that when it encounters O data, it rarely throws its hands up and admits, I don't know.
It guesses.
It guesses. And worse, it often guesses with incredibly high, completely unwarranted confidence.
That is terrifying in a disaster response scenario. I mean, if the AI looks at a weird radar shadow caused by a cyclone, hallucinates a flood, and confidently tells emergency responders to divert rescue helicopters to a village that is actually fine, people in the truly flooded villages could die because of a machine's arrogance.
Which is precisely why we need to talk about the ARCSIF paper in our stack.
Right, the one titled Confidence Estimation in Unsupervised Deep Change Vector Analysis.
Yes, it directly attacks this problem. The researchers argue that in safety-critical applications, like disaster response or military targeting, it is infinitely better to have absolute, mathematically verified confidence over a small, specific subset of the map than to have uncertain, hallucinated guesses covering the entire map.
Yeah, better to be absolutely certain about where 10 flooded houses are than to vaguely guess about 100. I agree completely. But how do you actually force an artificial intelligence to mathematically admit its own uncertainty?
They developed a technique called randomized smoothing. It's a brilliant approach. Instead of relying on a single AI model to spot the changes, they built a dual network system. You have two models working in tandem. We can call them Model F1 and Model F2.
Okay, two models. Let's walk through how they interact. What does F1 do?
Model F1 is the primary analyst. It looks at the before and after images, extracts the features, and highlights every single pixel that it believes has changed. It draws the initial map and says, here is where the flood is.
Standard AI stuff. But we don't trust it.
Exactly. We bring in Model F2. F2 is the auditor, the skeptic.
I like F2 already. How does it audit the map?
Think of it like a brutal eye exam. When F2 looks at the images, it doesn't look at the clean, perfect versions. Before it analyzes them, the system intentionally corrupts the data. It injects what is known as artificial Gaussian noise into the images.
Gaussian noise. So it's essentially scrambling the pixels, blurring the image, making it actively harder to read.
Yes, it intentionally degrades the data. Then F2 analyzes that noisy, corrupted image to see if it still detects the same changes that F1 found.
Oh, wow.
And it doesn't just do this once. It runs this audit iteratively, dozens or hundreds of times. Let's say K equals 100 iterations. It injects the 100 different random patterns of noise, creating 100 uniquely degraded versions of the event.
It's stress testing the primary model's conclusion, like an optometrist constantly changing the blurry lenses and asking, can you still read the bottom line? How about now? How about now?
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it, yes. If Model F1 says a specific pixel is changed, say a house is flooded, and Model F2, looking through all that chaotic injected noise, still independently flags that exact same pixel is flooded in 95 out of the 100 noisy iterations, the system makes a mathematical conclusion.
It says the signal is real.
It says this signal is so robust, so undeniable, that even when we introduce chaos into the system, the change is still perfectly detectable. We are highly confident this is real.
But what if F1 says the house is flooded, but when F2 looks at the noisy data, it only detects the flood in like 20 out of the 100 iterations?
Then the system flags that pixel as uncertain. The original signal was weak. It couldn't survive the introduction of noise. So the final output that the emergency manager sees isn't just a simple two-color map of changed and unchanged. It's a three-color map.
A map of confidence.
Precisely. Let's say it renders black for confidently changed, white for confidently unchanged, and red for not confident.
Think about what that means if you are the commander on the ground looking at this map. You don't have to guess if the machine is hallucinating. The machine is showing you its work. It's telling you exactly where it is confused.
Exactly.
If I am deploying those rescue helicopters, I am ignoring the red zones entirely. I am sending my team straight to the black zones, where the AI has stress tested its own logic and is absolutely certain the water has risen. So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means the future of AI isn't just machines giving us answers, it's machines telling us exactly how confident they are in those answers.
It introduces a necessary layer of mathematical humility into artificial intelligence.
Ah.
When we are dealing with the messy, unpredictable reality of the physical world, especially when lives are on the line, we need algorithms that know when to doubt themselves.
Definitely.
And the fact that this randomized smoothing works across optical, hyperspectral, and SAR data makes it the perfect safety net for the kind of fused data GalaxEye is pulling down.
So if we take a breath and look at where we are, we've got a single satellite carrying both optical and radar sensors perfectly fused to eliminate blind spots. We've got an onboard NVIDIA AI compressing the raw data into tactical insights in space. And we've got a methodology for ensuring the algorithms on the ground audit their own confidence so they don't hallucinate.
It really represents the absolute cutting edge of surface observation.
Surface observation,
Right.
right? Because everything we have talked about so far is about looking at the ground. But the patent filing we reviewed, I don't even know how to properly introduce this. When I first read patent WO2408365A1, I legitimately thought I was reading a script for a science fiction movie.
I had a very similar reaction. The title alone is staggering. Synthetic aperture radar, underground, undersea.
Underground, we are talking about using a satellite in space to see kilometers beneath the solid surface of the Earth. How is that even physically possible? I thought we just established that radar bounces off the surface. You literally said X-band bounces off leaves. How on earth is a microwave penetrating 3 kilometers of solid rock to map an underground bunker?
It isn't.
It isn't.
No, the microwaves themselves are not penetrating kilometers of solid rock. That would violate the laws of physics as we apply them in remote sensing.
Okay, thank you. I was losing my mind trying to picture that. So the microwave still bounces off the surface.
Yes, exactly. The breakthrough detailed in the patent is not about making the microwave dig into the dirt. It is about understanding what information is embedded in that surface bounce.
Okay.
To grasp this, we have to move away from thinking about the Earth as a static, solid object and start thinking about the physics of vibration and sound.
Okay, let's go slow here. Vibration, you mean like everything vibrates?
Correct. The surface of the Earth is in a state of perpetual microscopic motion. There is a continuous seismic rumble traveling through the crust. Furthermore, human activity, heavy traffic, mining, underground construction, even just industrial machinery, generates continuous vibrational and acoustic waves.
So phonic waves, sound waves traveling through the solid matter of the planet itself.
Exactly. Now imagine a massive, hollow space underground, a subterranean cave system or, say, a reinforced military bunker. When those sound waves travel through the dense rock and suddenly hit that hollow void, they change.
The waves change.
Yes, the physical structure of whatever is buried underground alters the acoustic resonance of the Earth around it.
It's like tapping on a wall to find a stud. The wall sounds different when it's hollow versus when there is solid wood behind it.
That is exactly the principle. Those altered mechanical vibrations eventually propagate all the way up to the surface, which means the very top layer of the ground, the exact surface that the satellite is looking at, is vibrating in highly specific microscopic patterns dictated by the structures buried deep beneath it.
Okay, I follow that. The ground is literally humming with the acoustic signature of whatever is underneath it. But how does a radar in space read a sound wave?
By relying on a concept you interact with every day, the Doppler shift.
Like an ambulance siren. The pitch is high when it drives toward you, and the pitch drops lower as it drives away.
Exactly. The sound wave is compressed as the object moves toward you and stretched as it moves away. But the Doppler shift doesn't just apply to sound. It applies to electromagnetic waves too, including microwaves.
Okay, I see where this is going.
When the satellite's SAR antenna fires a microwave pulse down at the Earth, it hits a surface that is vibrating. It is hitting a moving target.
Even if that target is only moving by a fraction of a millimeter?
Yes. The patent explains that if you look at a highly detailed radar file, specifically what they call a single look complex, or SLC SAR image, you can analyze the Doppler subapertures.
De-jargonize that for me. What is an SLC image and what is a Doppler subaperture?
Sure. Normally when a satellite processes an image, it strips away a lot of the complex phase data just to create a pretty picture we can look at. But an SLC image is the raw, unadulterated mathematical data. It retains both the amplitude, how strong the bounce was, and the phase, the exact timing of the waves.
So it's all the messy data.
All of it. By analyzing the phase data across these subapertures, which is basically looking at tiny, specific slices of the radar sweep over a fraction of a second, the software can detect incredibly minute subpixel spatial displacements.
You're saying the radar is so impossibly sensitive that it can measure the surface of the Earth physically moving by micrometers due to the sound waves bouncing around underneath it.
Yes, the satellite is measuring the orbital linear evolution of the Doppler spectrum. By tracking how the microwave echo shifts in frequency due to the vibrating ground, the software effectively records the acoustic signature of the Earth's surface.
It turns the surface of the planet into the diaphragm of a giant speaker.
Mm.
And the satellite is acting like a microphone floating 500 kilometers in space, just recording the vibrations of the speaker.
That is a phenomenal way to understand it, yes. But recording the vibration is only step one. Once you have that complex, chaotic sound information, you have to decode it. The patent details using advanced mathematical tools, specifically fast Fourier transforms and pulse compression.
Fourier transforms. I remember that from college calculus, and I remember hating it. How does it apply here?
Think of a Fourier transform like unbaking a cake.
Unbaking a cake.
Yeah. If I give you a baked chocolate cake, a Fourier transform is the mathematical process that allows you to figure out exactly how much flour, sugar, and cocoa went into it. In this context, you have massive, complex jumble of vibrational frequencies recorded from the surface. The Fourier transform untangles that jumble. It breaks the complex wave down into its pure individual frequencies.
So it isolates the specific vibration caused by the bunker from the background noise of like a nearby highway.
Exactly. And once you isolate those specific frequencies, you can run the physics in reverse. You invert the data. If the surface is vibrating exactly like this, It mathematically proves that there must be a void space shaped exactly like that 2 kilometers down.
You literally unbake the cake to find the bunker.
And the end result is a 3D tomographic image of what is beneath the surface. The patent claims this methodology can penetrate for kilometers. It can map deep underground infrastructure, natural cave systems, the thickness of ice shelves, or even the interior layout of a solid building extending above the ground.
Just pause and think about the sheer absurdity of what you just described. We have a satellite moving at 28,000 kilometers per hour through the vacuum of space, shooting microwaves through a monsoon, measuring microscopic vibrations on the mud, running complex calculus to unbake those vibrations, and rendering a 3D model of a subterranean tunnel 3 kilometers deep.
It completely redefines what we consider to be visible.
Now, to be absolutely fair to GalaxEye, Mission Drishti is currently focused on high-resolution OptoSAR surface imaging. They aren't explicitly advertising that they are hunting for underground bunkers right now, but this patent proves that the raw mathematical data required to do this, the SLC phase data, is actively being captured by these advanced SAR sensors.
Which leads to a truly staggering realization about the data we already have. This raises an important question. The patent explicitly states that this dense tomographic measurement can be extrapolated from any SLC radar image from any satellite, past or present, regardless of its operating frequency.
Wait, you're saying we don't need to launch a special underground radar satellite?
No, we just needed the mathematical keys to unlock the acoustic channel hidden within the electromagnetic data. Every single raw SAR file sitting in every server archive around the world right now secretly contains the acoustic signature of the underground world. We just haven't been processing it.
So every SAR satellite we've launched over the last decade is retroactively an underground sonar system. That is wild. When you take all of this together, the ability to see through clouds perfectly, edge computing that delivers tactical intelligence in minutes, self-auditing AI, and the theoretical capacity to map underground structures, the geopolitical implications are massive. You don't just hand this technology out to anyone. Who actually controls this?
Well, this is where we need to look at the larger strategic reality of the Indian space sector. GalaxEye is a commercial startup, but they are deeply intertwined with India's national security apparatus. Our sources detail a very crucial strategic alliance. GalaxEye has signed a comprehensive reseller agreement with New Space India Limited, or NSIL.
For those who don't follow the Indian space industry closely, what exactly is NSIL?
NSIL is a central public sector enterprise. It is essentially the commercial arm of ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization. Their mandate is to take the incredible technology developed by the Indian space sector and commercialize it, market it globally, and build a robust private space economy.
So ISRO is the NASA equivalent and NSIL is the business wing.
Exactly. Under this agreement, NSIL is going to market GalaxEye's entire product portfolio, including all of the sync-fused OptoSAR data, to global markets. They are integrating it alongside their existing catalog of data from the traditional IRS series of satellites.
That is a massive stamp of approval. You have the National Space Agency's commercial wing basically saying, this startup's data is so good, we are going to sell it as part of our official national portfolio. But reading between the lines of the press releases, this is about way more than just generating revenue, right? The chairman of NSIL specifically framed this partnership within the context of Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Yes, Atmanirbhar Bharat translates to self-reliant India. And to understand why that is so critical, you have to look at India's historical vulnerability in this space. Despite having one of the most successful and cost-effective space programs in the world, India has historically had to rely heavily on foreign commercial data for high-frequency, high-resolution Earth observation.
Especially during the monsoon season when their own optical satellites were blinded.
Precisely. If you are a sovereign nation, relying on a foreign corporation or a foreign government for the data you need to secure your own borders or manage your own natural disasters is a massive strategic vulnerability.
Right. If there is a sudden troop mobilization along a disputed border in the Himalayas in the middle of a storm, you don't want to be calling up an American or European satellite company hoping their satellite is passing over and waiting to buy the data. You want your own eyes in the sky, completely under your own sovereign control.
Mission Drishti provides exactly that capability. It severs the reliance on foreign data, and the Indian military is acutely aware of this. The sources note that the Indian Army's Northern Command has already conducted extensive user trials with GalaxEye's drone-based SAR technology.
So they have already battle-tested the sensors closer to the ground?
Yes. And by scaling this technology up to orbital satellites, the tactical landscape is fundamentally altered. Border surveillance can happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Enemy troops cannot hide under the cover of night. They can no longer use the dense monsoon clouds as a shield to mask their movements.
Nowhere to hide.
Exactly. The OptoSAR sensors will pierce the clouds, the NVIDIA edge computing will identify the convoys, and the actionable intelligence will be beamed directly to the commanders in minutes.
It is total spectrum dominance, but there is a catch. Mission Drishti is just one satellite. You mentioned earlier that a satellite in low Earth orbit might only pass over a specific location once every few days. The specs for Drishti note a revisit time of 4 days. That is great for tracking a flood over a week, but it isn't persistent surveillance. If an enemy moves on day 2, you miss them entirely.
Which is exactly why GalaxEye's long-term vision is the most important part of this story. They are not stopping at one satellite. Mission Drishti is just the proof of concept. The stated plan is to build a full constellation of 10 or more OptoSAR satellites by the end of the decade. The timeline suggests by 2029 or 2030.
10 satellites.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a constellation of 10 OptoSAR satellites completely changes the math. It drastically reduces the revisit time. It means you achieve near real-time, persistent monitoring of the entire globe. You can watch an area continuously, day and night, regardless of whether a hurricane is sitting on top of it.
If we pull back and look at the whole board, this is a massive structural shift in the global space economy. For decades, the commercial satellite imagery market has been a virtual monopoly, dominated by a handful of massive Western players. Now, that monopoly is facing a direct existential challenge from a highly efficient, natively dual-sensor solution developed by a startup in India.
They looked at the limitations of the legacy systems, experienced the geographical pain of the monsoon blind spot, and instead of accepting it, they built a fundamentally better mousetrap. And through NSIL, they're going to export that solution to the world.
It essentially democratizes access to what used to be considered top-tier classified military intelligence. When you combine the all-weather reliability of OptoSAR, the sheer speed of the onboard AI processing, and the global distribution network of NSIL, high-quality satellite imagery stops being a rare, expensive luxury.
It becomes a dependable, everyday utility. Think about the sectors this revolutionizes beyond defense. Agricultural planners can track crop health and soil moisture through the clouds, predicting yields with unprecedented accuracy.
Which is huge for food security.
Absolutely. Disaster response units can monitor the exact spread of a cyclone's floodwaters in real time. Infrastructure developers can monitor structural changes to dams and bridges with millimeter precision.
They will all have access to analysis-ready data that was completely unimaginable just 5 years ago. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by putting ourselves in the shoes of an emergency manager, looking up at the sky and realizing that for most of our history, simple clouds and darkness have kept us profoundly blind to what is happening on our own planet.
And we journeyed through the incredible ingenuity required to solve that. We saw how a student team from IIT Madras took the abstract, chaotic, noisy world of radar speckle and the intuitive clarity of optical cameras and managed to fuse them together on a single, thermally stable 190-kilogram platform, creating the world's first OptoSAR satellite.
We dug into the mechanics of how they bypassed the massive data bottlenecks of space communication by putting NVIDIA AI brains right there in orbit, processing raw data into actionable intelligence at the edge.
We explored the vital mathematics of randomized smoothing, proving that if we're going to rely on AI to read these maps in life-or-death situations, we must engineer those algorithms to have the humility to quantify their own uncertainty.
We even unbaked the mathematical cake of Fourier transforms, discovering that the silent microscopic vibrations of the Earth's surface can be decoded by radar to reveal 3D structures buried kilometers underground. And finally, we saw how all of this converges to propel India's space sector into a new era of absolute self-reliance.
It truly is a perfect encapsulation of modern innovation. It's not just about building a bigger rocket anymore. It is about the seamless convergence of aerospace engineering, quantum-level physics, and deep learning software, all working in perfect synchronization.
So the next time you are watching a local weather report predicting a storm's path, or reading a news article about global crop yields, or following the response to a natural disaster halfway across the world, I want you to stop and think about where that information is actually coming from. It's no longer just a scientist looking through a telescope or a pilot flying a reconnaissance plane. The data driving those massive global decisions is increasingly coming from edge computing, dual sensor satellites silently slicing through the clouds 500 kilometers above your head.
The sheer volume and depth of data being extracted from the Earth right now is unprecedented in human history.
Which leaves us with a final, somewhat unsettling thought to mull over. If we are truly entering an era where constellations of OptoSAR satellites can pierce the darkest nights and the thickest storms, where artificial intelligence can confidently detect even the slightest changes in a landscape in a matter of minutes, and where radar algorithms can theoretically listen to the micro vibrations of the Earth to map what is buried deep underground, does the concept of being hidden or off the grid even exist anymore? Or is the surface of our planet, and perhaps even the depths beneath it, about to become an open book, perfectly readable 24 hours a day from space? Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.